By all accounts, Terrance McKinney is the epitome of the All-American, a decorated veteran and a family man. A Fort Wayne, Indiana native, he became the first U.S. Army recruiter to be awarded the Indiana Army National Guard Soldier of the Year. A college grad, he married his sweetheart, Courtney, and became the first and only African-American employee of the Whitley County, Indiana Sheriff's Department. After his time in the military, law enforcement was his natural next step. What he didn't anticipate was the racism he would face from his co-workers and from the sheriff himself. 9 months after he was hired, he was fired on trumped-up charges by Sheriff Mark Hodges. McKinney sued the sheriff's office in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Indiana, claiming race discrimination. The district court granted summary judgment for the office of the sheriff against McKinney, which was reversed and remanded back down to the district court. The now retired distinguished former Chief Justice of the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, Richard Posner, was so outraged by Sheriff Hodges' dishonesty and obvious racism. He asked the sheriff's attorney if Sheriff Mark Hodges was a liar or an idiot.
What he's saying may be wrong. I mean, that's serious. So the sheriff is, has a responsible job. If he's wrong all the time, that's serious. Well, and if he's wrong all the time, why would you think he was acting honestly?
Well, being wrong and
stupid. Yeah, just stupid. He's honest, but he's stupid but honest. That's what you're saying.
Being stupid, being wrong, making a mistake are not
a mistake. Not a single. We're not talking about one mistake. It's otherwise unblemished record. Right?
I would disagree with that.
You think he made just one mistake, the sheriff?
Oh, the sheriff. I'm sorry. I thought you were asking about McKinney.
Pardon?
I thought you were asking about McKinney.
No, I'm asking about the sheriff. You say he just made one mistake?
I'm not
his
saying
whole life?
I'm not saying he did or he didn't. What I'm saying is that a mistake.
How many mistakes did he make?
I don't believe he made any mistakes.
Oh, right. That's what you think.
If the court feels that he
First
did.
You think he may have made you said, of course, he may have been wrong, but he was honest. Now you're taking that back. You say he's never made a mistake, as far as you know.
The reason why I wanted to become a police officer, I actually remember my dad came home, and him and my mom, they both got into a physical altercation. My brother was about 13 at the time, and he had basically had to fight my dad off of my mom. And I'll never forget the relief that I felt when the police officer came. And I knew at that moment, when he was there and he made sure my mom was safe, I knew that I wanted to be a police officer at that very moment. My mom is my mentor because she's been able to overcome just about any opposition. 4 kids, single woman, middle-aged. She had obtained her bachelor's degree while we were in high school. All of her kids all were in sports, and I don't know how this lady morphed and went to all these different events. She really gave us a phenomenal childhood, and she did that with no support. So to see someone that is so strong and so passionate and so resilient, I had no choice but to be that same way. When I finally became a police officer, I'll never forget when I finally raised my right hand and took the oath. I felt like everything that I had dreamed and worked towards when, serving in the military, going through the selection process, to going through the physical agilities test, passing the physical exam. I felt like I finally accomplished the goal that, trying to obtain. When I worked at the Whitley County Sheriff's Department, there were multiple instances that I felt were discriminatory or that immediately raised a red flag. The one that impacted me the most, my wife and I we got invited to the company or the sheriff's Christmas party, and I didn't want to go because at this point in time, this was December now, I'd already felt like I didn't belong there. But she convinced me to go. She said, "You deserve to be there," and so we went. I was excited to go. My wife was there, so I thought maybe this would kind of change the dynamics of the relationship there. And I remember getting there, and it was like time stopped. It was very quiet. Everybody looked when we walked in and kind of had that look like, oh, he actually came. And, you know, we sat in a table in the middle of the room, and there was no one within another table length away from us. I remember a young lady who worked in the kitchen. She pulled my arm and she said, "Why the hell did they ever hire you if they were going to treat you this way?" And I looked at her and I said, "You know, that's a great question." And I left. My honest belief is that there is some kind of systematic racism in our police departments. Before I ever wore the uniform of a law enforcement officer, I had just moved into a predominantly white neighborhood, and the refrigerator was stuck in demo mode. I had to take it back to Sears. I loaded it up in the truck, went down the road with my 5-year-old son, and 10 minutes into the ride, I was pulled over to a car at gunpoint for driving my own refrigerator back to Sears. Do I think that that situation would have been completely different if they would have said it was a white male? 100%. There are great cops, and I do think the cops are necessary, but at the same time, there's a lot of things that need to be corrected in our criminal justice system, specifically with a lot of the police departments.
In this Insider exclusive network TV special, Black But Not Blue Enough, a black police officer's ordeal with racism on the force, our news team visits with Terrance McKinney and his lawyers, Robert, Owen, Vegeler, and Rachel Guin, to discuss the unique aspects of this case, the legal challenges they faced in the case, and the current struggle against racism and cronyism going on across this country. This is the Insider exclusive, live from Fort Wayne, Indiana. It is my great pleasure to introduce Robert Vegeler and Rachel Guin to the show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We're here today to talk about your client, Terrance McKinney. Tell our audience a little bit about Terrance, Rachel.
Sure. Terrance is really a fascinating man. He came from very humble beginnings. He was raised by a single mother, one of 4 boys that she gave birth to, and then she was also known for bringing other young men into the home that needed a safe place to stay. So their family is unique in that Terrance will tell you he has 5 brothers or 6. Biologically he has 3, but there are many others that are included in their family dynamic. And in doing that, he went through high school. He was a track star, broke records at his high school, went on to college, and the ultimate goal for him was always to work in law enforcement. And his opportunity came when he applied for the position at the Whitley County Sheriff to be a sheriff's deputy officer there. He tested in the top of the, I believe he was the top applicant for physical fitness, and second to top for all other aptitude tests. And so rightfully so, he was hired on at the same time as another deputy who was a Caucasian. But very early on, Terrance became aware that he was not going to be treated as fairly and equally as his white counterparts.
And I saw that when I was reading the materials, and the fact that he wasn't sent to training for 8 months after he'd been hired, correct? Whereas his counterpart went right away, right?
Actually, that counterpart had already received the training, but for past hires, it had always been almost immediate, yes.
So now what happened so that after 9 months, I think he got terminated, correct?
Yeah, just shy.
Terminated for bogus reasons. What were those reasons?
Well, the 3 main reasons the sheriff put forth was failure to put in monthly activity reports, misuse of a fuel card, and false reporting of his work hours.
And basically they were calling him a slackard and a liar, right?
Correct.
Usually when someone's terminated, especially from a governmental agency, they have an opportunity to appeal that, correct?
That's correct.
Did he have that opportunity?
No, he did not.
He did not. It was just see you later.
Correct, and the reason for that is because he was considered like a probationary employee because he didn't have 1 year in. And that was something that the Sheriff's Department tried to use against him later on as to why he was fired so quickly. And we, I think, mentioned lots of examples in there of other employees who the sheriff didn't even consider for termination who had received multiple complaints from within the community, who had been the result of Indiana State Police reports and investigations because of bad behavior, to no avail, and the sheriff would occasionally suspend them for a day. But just really egregious behavior that you should really hold law enforcement to a higher standard, and these people were really the bottom of the barrel.
Now, he eventually ended up calling you, correct?
That's correct.
When he first came in, what impressed you about him?
His intelligence. He was articulate. He was well-dressed, physically fit. I mean, it was everything that you don't normally see sometimes in the justice system. So, given that background and how he knew every fact about in relation to his situation, it was an easy start.
And it was an easy start, but it took some time to get this resolved, right?
First, you have to file a notice of tort claim within 6 months. And then the county gets to respond to that, and then eventually within 2 years you have to file your lawsuit, which I did, and then you go through the arduous discovery process.
Now, Rachel, let's talk about where this case was tried, the venue. I understand it's not the most favorable area. Address that, please.
The case actually didn't go to trial, Steve. We did settle it shortly before trial, but we were set to try originally in the Northern District of Indiana, Fort Wayne Division. And what that means for plaintiffs in this area is that your jury pool pulls from the outlying counties, and those counties tend to be very conservative. In fact, one is known for being one of the starting points for the Ku Klux Klan. So if you're an African American as a plaintiff going to trial in Fort Wayne, Indiana, your chances of success are very, very low.
I understand about 80% of the discrimination cases in that area get dismissed.
Even if they win, the win is often negligible. There was the last civil rights case that was tried here, or that would be deemed a civil rights case with an African American plaintiff, got a favorable verdict with a $1 monetary award, which is shameful.
When this case was filed, it was dismissed.
It was dismissed at motion for summary judgment. Robert appealed the case to the Seventh Circuit and was successful. It was a very good verdict from the Seventh.
Yeah. Now let's talk about the Seventh Circuit. The Seventh Circuit at that time, the Chief Justice was who?
Richard Posner.
And what should we know about Richard Posner?
He, I believe it was during the Reagan era, or maybe one of the early Bush one, was one of the prime candidates for the United States Supreme Court. And he is brilliant. He's written books. And so when he's on the bench, he controls when he wants to. But he doesn't ask a lot of questions, like in this case. He asked 2.
Yeah, I listened to the audio, and if I remember correctly, he said something to the effect to the sheriff's attorney. Is your client, Sheriff Mark Hodges, right, is either a liar or an idiot? Is that right?
That is a quote.
It gets right to the point, right?
That's right.
What happened at the Seventh Circuit? What did they do?
Well, the Seventh Circuit reversed unanimously, and there were 8 evidentiary points, and there were 5 points of law that I briefed in the Seventh Circuit brief, and the Seventh Circuit reversed all 13 of them unanimously.
So now you're ready to go to trial again.
That's right.
What happens?
I bring Rachel in because she is so competent and so more experienced in this area that I needed her intellectual firepower. And then she took over the briefing and damage analysis.
I found it amazing that for the longest time, the Sheriff's Department's defense was, hey, we hired the first African American. Why would we fire the person that we hired? How did you address it?
I don't think that I need to, because I think Judge Hamilton did a fantastic job when he addressed it in that scathing opinion that the Seventh Circuit issued. And he said it very well. It is plausible that a sheriff could hire the first African American to work for him and assume that things, or hope that things will go well. But as soon as he realizes that that African American is being discriminated against him, that his coworkers aren't going to be accepting, he makes up a reason to get rid of him, because he'd rather do that than face the backlash from his employees.
What was the ultimate result of the case?
Rachel and I maneuvered it to the point where we were going to try it in a different county, different part of the Northern District, to get a more favorable jury. And that resulted in a federal magistrate judge being appointed the mediator. And then we traveled up to Hammond and spent half a day mediating the case, which resulted in a monetary verdict.
Mm-hmm. And I understand it's public, right?
It is public.
$350,000. Is that correct? Now, what is the significance of this case?
I'm going to segue to Rachel because I think the significance is markedly pointed at a seminar she went to, which was a national employment seminar.
I actually didn't go to that seminar, but I was made aware that the case was being taught across the nation to both plaintiffs and defense attorneys of what not to do if you're on the defense side and how to handle a case if you are a plaintiff. Because what the sheriff did try to do was break the points apart and say, well, this one little thing was here, and so we're going to focus on this. And what the Seventh Circuit said was, no, we're going to look at the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is obviously that this man was treated differently than his similarly situated white coworkers, and less favorably. And the facts that you've brought, this little thing and this little thing here, they're all fabricated. None of it's true, and you're not going to get away with it. And so that's where I think Robert and I feel very good that we held them accountable, because that's very difficult to do, particularly in a red state. But we did hold them accountable. And I often tell my clients that the name of your show is somewhat ironic. I can't get you justice, because what does justice look like? I can't undo what's been done to you. But I do think in this case, we found a little bit of justice for Terrance.
You did, and congratulations on there. Today we have with us Terrance. So let's bring him on right now. It is my great pleasure to introduce Terrance McKinney to the show. Welcome to the show, Terrance.
Hey, thanks for having me, Steve.
Terrance, I'm glad you're here today to tell your version of what happened in your case. Obviously, your lawyers have, did a great job, and you got a great settlement. What was it like working? Well, let's go back here. When you first got hired, that was fulfilling a dream, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was. I was, I have a biracial family. I grew up, my wife's white, my grandmother was white. So I never necessarily never experienced anything like it when I worked at the Whitley County Sheriff's Department. But it was a lifelong dream. I've always wanted to be in a position where I helped people. And if you look at my, the things that I've done throughout my, short lifetime, you'll see that I served in the military, got into law enforcement. So I just have a natural passion for helping people. So that's what's brought me into law enforcement.
When did you first recognize something was amiss, something was wrong when you were on the job?
So I started in August. I would say probably around the end of September, early October. I immediately saw that I was getting treated differently. I would see that my counterpart, Corey Bailey, he would go out and he would do patrols, he would do those things, and I would just be sitting around in the jail. So one of the things that I did during that time was I self-taught myself while I was sitting around doing nothing. So I learned how to talk on the radio. I learned the area by driving around on my off time, like things that they were supposed to be teaching me, I taught myself.
Was your immediate supervisor the sheriff?
No, so I had multiple training officers during that time. I would say supposedly, but most of the time we would just go hang out at someone's house, or we would go hang out at a barbecue. This was
on the job.
On the job, getting paid. So there really was no. There really was no training. The sheriff did take me out like one time to run traffic. But that was because I got complained that I didn't do it.
And who did you complain to? The sheriff?
The sheriff.
Okay. When you complained to the sheriff, what would he say to you?
He would just say, "Oh, okay. Well, I'll take you out, and we'll run traffic one day."
But 9 months, or let's say 8 months into the job, you still hadn't been sent for official training, correct?
I want to say I started in August, and I didn't go to training until sometime in May. So I did end up going to the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy, but I was ultimately terminated during that time at the academy.
So when you go to the academy, you don't report to work anymore. You're just going to the academy, right?
Correct.
So were you notified by mail? Were you notified by a phone call? What?
So I was actually notified by phone. We had just got through finishing the emergency vehicle operation course, where the instructor actually sent a recommendation back on my behalf because I did so well during that training. And we just concluded, the week ended, I think it was a Thursday, and the director came and said, "Hey, the sheriff wants you to report back to the department. Do not wear your uniform." So I'm thinking, maybe it's a family emergency. And then on the way, on the 2.5 hour drive there.
You must have asked them what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I called my wife just to make sure everything's okay. And they just said, you just need to report, do not wear your uniform. So I eventually get back and they told me I was being terminated, the reasons for termination. And I said, well, this doesn't make sense. They gave me the paperwork that ultimately ended up proving my point, in showing that the reasons for termination were fluff. They didn't hold substance. So, but that was, and then they followed me to my home to collect all the weapons, and that was my last day. I'll never forget it.
How did you feel?
I felt like I failed.
You felt you had done something wrong?
No, not necessarily the fact that I had done something wrong. I felt like I let my family down. At that time, I had just built a new house. I had a brand new, I think my baby was 3 months old at the time. And I was more upset because I knew I didn't do nothing wrong, but how do I explain this to my family?
How long did it take you to come to Robert?
It was interesting. I wasn't going to. But the actual state police officer that worked at that department while I was there, he had reached out to me. He told me that I should talk to someone. So I started to do my homework, and Robert was the first attorney I met. I was actually scheduled to go and talk to a variety of attorneys during that day so that I could make an informed decision. And we had an instant connection, and I decided that he was who I wanted to represent me. Now
that this case is over and you've won, what do you have to say to anybody out there who went through the same thing that you did? Fight for justice. Justice for people is different. For me, even though my case is ended, I am still seeking justice. Part of that journey is doing this show to bring awareness that the individuals at Whitley County, that there is some bias there, and that still needs to be addressed. So even though the case is over, I still can do my best and do my part as an advocate, and to really educate other individuals going through similar things, that you got to really fight for justice. It's not something that's given to you. I want to thank you for being on the show. Thank you. What is race discrimination according to the courts?
Sure. Race discrimination comes in a lot of forms. It can be harassment, which is what we see that's more obvious. Name calling. There have been cases in this area where there are nooses left in people's lockers, KKK scratched into their desks at work, or it can be more subtle, which is what Terrance experienced. And that's when you all of a sudden notice that people around you are doing the exact same thing, and you're getting in trouble and they're not. Or people are lying about you and nobody wants to listen that it's unfair or not true. And ultimately, you're terminated, standing alone as the only African American in a sea of white people, realizing you've done nothing wrong, but you're not receiving the same opportunities as those white counterparts.
How do you prove this?
Well, you prove it by pushing forward and looking for the truth. And I always tell my clients that the truth will come forward. It really will. You have to be patient, but often that's in the documents. It's in the comparing one officer who was seen and confirmed to have blown through a stop sign for no reason, who caused an accident, who they believe beat up a mentally ill child and is still working on that force, and another officer who did nothing wrong. Certainly we're not all perfect, and Terrance will be the first to acknowledge he's not perfect, but he did nothing to justify his termination.
When you are terminated, as Terrance was, for no reason whatsoever, for bogus reasons, what should you do?
He's going to search his agenda and his life, and he's going to ask himself, or herself, do I need to talk to a lawyer? Do I need to find out what my rights are? Do I need to know if there is some way I can remedy this situation and make things right? And that's when you go and talk to a lawyer, and hopefully a discrimination lawyer, and then you dig through the facts and try to put together a plan of action.
Okay, you know, this kind of case brought a lot of publicity. People call your office. You know, they say their rights have been violated. How do you select the clients that you eventually end up representing?
It's really important that your clients have reasonable expectations, and that they understand the environment that they are going to have to work within in that litigation. And so, for me, my clients have to understand up front, we are in a very conservative area of the country. The cards are stacked against us. And so even when the truth comes forward, it's a very rare case that ends like Terrance's. And frankly, this case could have been resolved for a lot less much earlier, but the sheriff never took it seriously. And so shame on them, but they ultimately paid for it.
How about yourself, Robert? When people contact you, you've been around quite some time, handled a lot of cases. What turns you on with a case that you want to represent somebody?
Articulateness of the potential client, as well as looking for an egregious situation that you can differentiate the behavior in front of a trier of fact, such as a juror or a judge, and something that has curb appeal. The facts have to have curb appeal for you to even get somebody to listen. And once you get past that, then you dig in.
I want to thank both of you for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.